everybody, welcome back to my channel. So in this tutorial video I'm going to be going through how to draw a realistic nose and mouth using graphite pencils. So this is the final result, and if you guys do want to follow along with me in real time, then I have got all of the real-time tutorials for the nose and the mouth available on my Patreon along with voiceover. So I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check them out. But anyway guys, let's get on with the tutorial. So the first thing that I'm doing is I'm taking one of my darker pencils, which is a 6B pencil, but you can use something like a 3B or 4B as well if you want to. And I'm just using that to establish the darkest areas, which were the nostrils and the side of the nose. So I just looked at my reference photo and I picked out those darkest areas and I just blocked them in with that darkest pencil. And now I'm taking a slightly lighter pencil. I think I'm using something like a 2B here, and I'm just using that to block in the shadows for the rest of the nose. So I've got the reference photo in front of me and I'm just using it to identify where the main shadows are in the nose. And mainly I'm just blocking in all of the areas at this point apart from the highlighted areas, which tended to be down the middle of the nose. Once I've got in a general base layer for the nose, I go in with a darker pencil and just work on building up even more shadows for those slightly darker areas. And if you notice, I'm using the pencil on the side, and that helps prevent using lots of pressure so that when we blend out the pencil, we can get a really nice smooth look without seeing all of those pencil stroke lines. So my aim here is to get a base layer down on the whole of the nose and get all of the shadows in the right place before I go and blend it out. So I want to establish where the darkest shadows are, where the slightly lighter shadows are, and I just want to get all of the general values blocked in so that when I blend it all out, it just becomes very smooth, but you can still see the structure of the nose. You still want to be able to see where those darkest shadows are. So once I've added that base layer and I'm happy with all of my values, I'm going in with a clean stump and I'm just using that to blend out the whole area, going in circular motions, and I'm just using that to blend it all out. But we will be adding more and more pencil layers and blending that out, so I'm not worried too much about getting it super smooth at the moment because we're going to be building on it with more pencil. So just keep making sure that you've blended out all of the grain of the pencil and all of those pencil strokes. And now I'm going in with a 6B pencil and I'm really starting to deepen up those shadows, those darkest shadows, and really make them dark and provide more contrast to the nose, because to make it pop, to make it look realistic, you want to have a really good contrast, which means you want to have some darker shadows and some brighter highlights. And to create those brighter highlights, we will be using a kneaded eraser later on to pull up those brightest areas. So it doesn't matter if they get a bit pencil on them at the moment. So generally the shadows on the nose tend to be down the side and like underneath the nose where those nostrils are, and then the highlighted areas tend to be towards the middle of the nose, that tip of the nose and the middle of the top of the nose. And so this is just the general rule, but obviously it depends on the reference photo, which angle the nose is facing, and also the lighting source. So once I built up another layer of those shadows, again I'm going in with that blending stump. I'm leaving it dirty, it doesn't matter if it's too clean, and I'm just going back in and blending over all of those shadows that we added. And once you blend it out, you can see that it becomes slightly lighter because you've smudged all of the graphite around. It's not all concentrated in one area. You've sort of smoothed out, so it does kind of lose its sort of definition a bit, so you have to go back in again and build up those shadows once more. And the more you build up the layers and the more you blend it, the more it will darken up and get to that level that you want it to be. So again, I just added 6B pencil to those darkest areas and I'm just blending that out with the blending stump. And so I will keep repeating this process until I'm really happy with the shadows that I've got. And like I said, don't worry too much about the highlights at the moment. We'll deal with them at the end. At the moment, it's just about focusing on getting those mid-tone values in and those shadows. And make sure that you keep looking at your reference photo, even though you've already established the shadows. Just keep making sure that you're referring back to your reference photo to see if you've got those shadows as dark as they need to be. You can put the reference photo up to your drawing and just compare the values and see if you need to go darker. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish off building those shadows up, but then I'm going to start to add some of the freckles. So to do the freckles, I'm just adding like little circular motions, and when I add these in, they're going to look very defined, they're going to look very unrealistic, but the way I'm going to get them to look more natural is once I've added all of these little dots, which I'm doing with varied degrees of pressure, so some look darker and some look lighter and more subtle. Once I've added these various little dots in and random little squiggly shapes for the freckles, I'm going to go in with my blending stump and just sweep over all of those freckles, and that will blend in more to the skin. So they don't look like they're just harshly plonked on top of the skin, they actually look like they're part of the skin. So I'm just going to keep building up these freckles and just add some darker ones that are more prominent, and just keep blending over them so that they really merge in with the skin and they don't just look really fake. So keep building them up and it will start to look realistic. As you can see, I'm just layering and layering, and now I'm going to go and pull up some of the highlights. So in my reference photo, there wasn't just a clean edge of where that highlight was because there was a lot of freckles. So I just kind of dabbed the kneaded razor to lift up areas towards the middle of the nose and also in the tip of the nose as well. So now that I added in the highlights, I'm going to go back to working on the freckles and also building up some of those darker shadows, because it's important to keep looking at your reference photo and just comparing things. Once you've got everything blocked in, make sure that you keep making sure your values are correct. So again, I saw that I needed to darken up some of those darker shadows, and as I'm doing that, I keep blending between those layers. And if you do want to get that smooth look, it is really important to limit the pressure that you're applying onto the pencil. That is the most important thing to avoid getting those streaky pencil lines showing through, and this will really help you achieve a smooth result if you just use your pencil to the side and use very light pressure. It's just so important. And so now I'm just going and I'm tweaking things, I'm pulling up those highlights, and I'm generally just trying to make the nose look as close to the reference photo as possible at this point. It looked fine before, but I just want to make it look more accurate to that nose that I'm drawing. But again, it's just about tweaking. I spend a lot of time once I got everything in just adjusting tiny little things just to make it look as good as possible. But that's the basics of how I go about drawing the nose. So I'm almost done with the nose now, and then we're going to get on to drawing the mouth. And so the first thing that I do when drawing the mouth is I like to get in that center line, which is the darkest line. And I'm doing that using my darkest graphite pencil, which is the 6B. And so once I've done that, I start to work on the top lip, and I'm just using a 3B pencil, a slightly lighter pencil, just to block in the general shadows. I'm basically blocking in everywhere but the highlighted areas, and I'm also starting to build up some of the shadows which are to the sides of the mouth. So like I said, I got in a base layer for the whole of the mouth apart from those highlights, and now I'm just using that pencil to get in where those shadows are. And I'm also getting in some of the skin around the mouth as well, just using like a 2B pencil or a B grade pencil, and I'm just using the side of it. As you can see, it is very messy, but because I'm not applying a lot of pressure, these pencil lines will really smooth out once you blend it out. So now I'm blending over the whole area with that blending stump, and I'm really adding a bit more shadow to those more shadowed areas in the reference photo to give it a full look. And with the mouth, the shadows tend to be on the top and the bottom at the outer edges, and then towards the middle it tends to be more highlighted. And so I'm also using that blending stump to add some shadows to the skin and like the cupid's bow, just to add a bit more structure. So if you have got some graphite on your blending stump and it is quite dirty, then you can use that to add some of the shadows as well. So I'm also adding a bit of shadow under the mouth, and now I'm starting to work back on the mouth. I got in the center line a bit darker, and I'm also darkening up some of those shadows on the outside edges of the mouth as well. And I'm also just looking at the reference photo, and again, like the nose, I just look where the darkest shadows are, and I just keep adding that pencil and blending it out until I get them as dark as they need to be. I also work on adding some of the main little textures and cracks on the lips. So I look at the direction that the cracks are going in, and it's important to make sure that they curve with the mouth. If you want to learn more about how to draw a nose and a mouth in graphite, then I have got two separate videos, which is a do's and don'ts for drawing a nose and a do's and don'ts for drawing a mouth. So I will link them up above so that you can check them out as well, so that you can learn more about how to draw these two features. So once I've got in all of the shadows, I'm going in with the kneaded eraser to add in the highlights, and I'm just using that to pull up the main highlights, which is above the top lip. And when they look a bit harsh, I just go over with the blending stump just to soften them out a bit so they're not so bright, and to merge them in with the rest of the skin. And I just keep doing that and just keep pulling up these highlights. I keep pulling up the brightest highlights so that they don't get too dark. And you also really want to look at how the nose skin connects with the mouth and that sort of middle area. So again, I'm working on the texture on the lips. It's really important to look at how those cracks and shadows curve with the mouth. If you want your mouth to look full and realistic, you need to look at the way those cracks curve and also the way the highlights curve as well. So I'm just building up that texture. There was some texture in these lips, they weren't completely smooth, so that's why I'm focusing on building it up. And also because the centre line is really dark, I'm going in with my black coloured pencil and I'm just using that to really darken up and make that really dark so that it's got such a nice contrast. And I'm also now just building up more and more shadows on the skin. So like at the moment, I've got everything blocked in, everything's where it needs to be. It's just about spending that bit of extra time, really making sure everything is as detailed as it needs to be, everything's as dark as it needs to be, or as highlighted as it needs to be. Just really focus on making those small adjustments. And I find that the small adjustments at the end really make it look so much better and really make it look really good. Otherwise, if you don't do those adjustments, then you're missing out on a lot of potential to make your drawing even better. So just once you've got everything in, look through the reference photo again and try to look at every little part individually and really see what needs to be changed. So again, I'm doing the same sort of method that I did with the nose with the freckles. I'm just adding those little circles and I will go over with a tissue or a blending stump just to blend them out. As you can see, I also tried to incorporate some freckles onto the edge of the mouth as well to sort of blend in and merge where the mouth and the skin around the mouth meet, and I'm just going in and blending that all out. But that's basically it for this tutorial. I really hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, I've got the real-time versions of this as well as drawing an eye and hair available on my Patreon. So there's a link at the end so you can check that out. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new to my channel and you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure to hit that subscribe button. But I'll see you guys next time. Bye everybody.